This week we're talking about learning outcomes and evidence of student learning. All too often when we think about how to evaluate what a student understands, we fall back into the familiar and easy rut of some sort of quiz or exam, or something that it's easy to measure, but this may not tell us exactly what the student truly understands. It may tell us what they recall or remember, but it doesn't go to the deeper levels of understanding. We'll be talking about assessments more later in the course, but even this week, as you're writing your learning objectives and thinking about evidences of understanding, I need you to think about what a student can do to prove to you that they actually understand the concepts that you're covering. In contrast to the idea of testing or exams, the Understanding by Design text repeatedly mentions the value of performance as evidence of student understanding. The concept here is that if we ask a student to perform a real-world task, we have a better means of evaluating what they actually understand than if we have them take a quiz or an exam about it. So, for example, if you're in an instructional design course, it makes more sense for you to go about performing the task of creating an actual learning module than it does for you to take a test or a quiz that asks you to recall what the 6 facets of understanding might be. This can be applied to most any subject you're teaching or developing for. The idea here is to have students do what you're asking them to learn, and that's what you end up evaluating when you look at the evidence of their understanding actually is. One buzzword or phrase that you may come across in relation to this concept is authentic assessment. Just to give you another example, consider the student driver. You don't want to just give the written exam, you actually want to see them driving. This allows a student to perform the task, and then you can evaluate how they are able to perform that skill. The concept here is really very logical. As we prepare students to think and live in the real world, we want them to be practicing the tasks and the things that they'll be doing, including the decisions that they'll be making in the real world. If you're going for a surgical procedure, for instance, I'm going to bet that you're hoping the surgeon has had some authentic assessment in their history and not just a written exam in their past to prove their competence. This relates to nearly any subject that you're teaching. So what I'm asking you to do is to think about what your students are going to do in the real world and think about how they can prove to you they understand how to do those things. Think about the tasks that are real or authentic they'll be performing in the real world when they've completed your course. And lastly, now that I have you thinking about authentic assessment and real-world performances and their value in the classroom, I want to take just a moment to remind you that doing something correctly doesn't automatically prove that a student understands why they're doing it that way. So in the context of real-world subject matter, in the context of real-world tasks they'll be performing when they leave your classroom, I also want you to think about using either the 6 facets of understanding or the verbs from Bloom's taxonomy to write your learning objectives to specify what it is you want the students to demonstrate. As you conclude the lesson this week, I hope this will be helpful to you in thinking about levels of understanding and definitions for those levels, and in addition, evidences for those levels of understanding.